Let's take a look at the group policy management consoles. If I'm on a local machine, and right now I'm on a Windows 10 machine that is not joined to a domain, I'm just going to type gpedit.msc, and that's where the group policy console is. When I click that, I'm in my local group policy, and it says local computer policy or local group policy editor. If I'm on a domain, let's go over to a domain computer. I'm going to click Start, and then I could go to Server Manager and then up to the tools here and down to Group Policy Management. Or if I wish, I can just click Start and then Windows Administrative Tools and then down to Group Policy Management. Now in the domain here, you see something called Group Policy Objects. And all of the group policy objects, no matter where they are, no matter where they exist in the rest of the structure, will show up here in the group policy objects. Here are the two that I created earlier, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete those two. And here you see two default ones. There's a default domain controllers policy, which will be a policy that Microsoft set up for all of the domain controllers in our domain. And then there's a default domain policy that will be effective against all of everything in the domain, everything from here on down in the domain. So all of these two are default policies. Now you'll also find these in the appropriate sections. So for example, default domain policy, if I look here under domain, there's the default domain policy. I can say that this policy, this default domain policy, is linked to this domain. And you can see this little symbol over here that shows that it's been linked. Now if I look under domain controllers, we should find the default domain controllers policy is linked to the domain controllers OU. Remember that OU is built in. I created these three OUs, but that one's built in. So you can see that it shows up in two places, under these objects and then linked under these individual items here. Now in order to create a group policy, I can simply right-click on the container I want to create it in. So for example, the widget domain, if I right-click there, I can create a group policy and link it here. Now if I do that, it's going to show up both down here in group policy objects, and it would show up linked here. These are OUs, so I can right-click an OU and create a group policy and link it here. Or if I have a site here and I don't have one listed, I could right-click that site and then create a group policy object and link it here. Now if I wish, I can also create it in here, make a new group policy object, and then I can link it later on. One other thing I can do to a group policy once I have it created and linked is to right-click it and click Enforced. If I click Enforced, it overrides the hierarchy that we talked about earlier. In other words, it will cause this group policy to be enforced even if another policy that's applied later tries to override it. So this will prevent conflicts from happening later on if I enforce this policy.